Hello there. Welcome. I was just about to read a story. You're more than welcome to sit down, relax, and I'm happy to read it aloud. Let's go on this journey together. Grab a drink, sit back, relax. Let's get started. An Honest Thief by Fyodor Dostoevsky. One morning, just as I was about to set off to my office, Agrafena, my cook, washerwoman and housekeeper, came into me and to my surprise entered into conversation. She had always been such a silent, simple creature that except her daily inquiry about dinner, she had not uttered a word for the last 6 years. I at least had heard nothing else from her. "Here I have come in to have a word with you, sir," she began abruptly. "You really ought to let that little room." "Which little room?" "Why, the one next to the kitchen, to be sure." "What for?" "What for? Why, because folks do take in lodgers, to be sure." But who would take it?" "Who would take it? Why, a lodger would take it, to be sure." "But, my good woman, one could not put a bedstead in it. There wouldn't be room to move. Who could live in it? Who wants to live there? As long as he has a place to sleep in, why, he would live in the window." "In what window?" "In what window? As though you didn't know. The one in the passage, to be sure. He would sit there, sewing or doing anything else. Maybe he would just sit in a chair, too. He's got a chair, and he has a table, too. He's got everything. Who is he, then? Oh, a good man, a man of experience. I will cook for him, and I will ask him 3 rubles a month for his board and lodge." After a prolonged effort, I succeeded at last in learning from Agrafena that an elderly man had somehow managed to persuade her to admit him into the kitchen as a lodger and a boarder. Any notion Agrafena took into her head had to be carried out. If not, I knew she would give me no peace. When anything was not to her liking, she at once began to brood, and sank into a deep dejection that would last for a fortnight or 3 weeks. During that period, my dinners were spoiled, my linen was mislaid, my floors were unscrubbed. In short, I had a great deal to put up with. I had observed long ago that this inarticulate woman was incapable of conceiving a project, of originating an idea of her own, but if anything like a notion or a project was by some means put into her feeble brain, to prevent it being carried out meant, for a time, her moral assassination. And so, as I cared more for my peace of mind than for anything else, I consented forthwith. "Has he a passport, anyway, or something of that sort?" "To be sure he has. He is a good man, a man of experience. 3 rubles he promised to pay." The very next day, the new lodger made his appearance, in my modest bachelor quarters, but I was not put out by this. Indeed, I was inwardly pleased. I led, as a rule, a very lonely hermit's existence. I had scarcely any friends. I hardly ever go anywhere. As I spent 10 years never coming out of my shell, I had, of course, grown used to solitude. But another 10 or 15 years or more of the same solitary existence with the same Agrafena in the same bachelor quarters was in truth a somewhat cheerless prospect, and therefore a new inmate, if well behaved, was a heaven-sent blessing. Agrafena had spoken truly. My lodger was certainly a man of experience. From his passport it appeared that he was an old soldier, a fact which I should have known indeed from his face. An old soldier is easily recognized. Astafy Ivanovich was a favourable specimen of his class. We got on very well together. What was best of all, Astafy Ivanovich would sometimes tell a story, describing some incident in his own life. In the perpetual boredom of my existence, such a storyteller was a veritable treasure. One day he told me one of his stories. It made an impression on me. The following event was what led to it. I was left alone in the flat. Both Astafy and Agrafena were out on business of their own. All of a sudden, I heard from the inner room somebody I fancied a stranger come in. I went out. There actually was a stranger in the passage. A short fellow, wearing no overcoat, in spite of the cold autumn weather. What do you want? Does a clerk called Alexandrov live here? Nobody of that name here, brother. Goodbye. Why, the dvornik told me it was here, said my visitor, cautiously retiring towards the door. Be off! Be off! Brother, get along! Next day, after dinner, while Astafy Ivanovitch was fitting on a coat which he was altering for me, again someone came into the passage. I half opened the door. Before my very eyes, my yesterday's visitor, with perfect composure, took my wadded greatcoat from the peg and, stuffing it under his arm, darted out of the flat. Agrafena stood all the time staring at me, agape with astonishment, and doing nothing for the protection of my property. Astafy Ivanovitch flew in my pursuit of the thief, and 10 minutes later came back out of breath and empty-handed. He had vanished completely. Well, there's a piece of luck, Estevan Ivanovitch. It's a good job your cloak is left. Or he would have put that in your plight as well, the thief. But the whole incident had so impressed Astafy Ivanovitch that I forgot the theft as I looked at him. He could not get over it. Every minute or two he would drop the work upon which he was engaged and would describe over again how it all happened. How it had been standing, how the greatcoat had been taken down before his very eyes, not a yard away, and how it had come to pass that he could not catch the thief. Then he would sit down to his work again, and then leave it once more. And at last I saw him go down to the Dvornik to tell him all about it, and to upbraid him for letting such a thing happen in his domain. Then he came back and began scolding Agrafena. Then he sat down to his work again, and long after he was still muttering to himself how it had all happened, how he stood there, and I was here, how before our eyes, not a yard away, the thief took the coat off the peg, and so on, and so on. In short, though Astafy Ivanovitch understood his business, he was a terrible slow coach and busybody. He made fools of us, Astafy Ivanovitch, I said to him in the evening, as I gave him a glass of tea. I wanted to while away the time by recalling the story of his lost greatcoat, the frequent repetition of which, together with great earnestness of the speaker, was beginning to become very amusing. Fools indeed, sir. Even though it is no business of mine, I am put out. It makes me angry, though it is not my coat that was lost. To my thinking, there is no vermin in the world worse than a thief. Another takes what you can spare, but a thief steals the work of your hands, the sweat of your brow, the time. Ugh! It's nasty. One can't speak of it. It's too vexing. How is it you don't feel the loss of your property, sir? Yes, you are right, Astafy Ivanovitch. Better if the thing had been burnt. It's annoying to let the thief have it. It's disagreeable. Disagreeable! I should think so. Yet, to be sure, these are thieves and thieves. And I have happened, sir, to come across an honest thief. An honest thief? But how can a thief be honest, Astafy Ivanovitch? There you are right indeed, sir. How can a thief be honest? There are none such. I only meant to say that he was an honest man, sure enough. And yet he stole. I was simply sorry for him. Why, How was that, Astafy Ivanovich?
It was about 2 years ago, sir. I had been nearly a year out of my place, and just before I lost my place, I made the acquaintance of a poor lost creature. We got acquainted in a public house. He was a drunkard, a vagrant, a beggar. He had been in a situation of some sort, but from his drinking habits, he had lost his work. Such a ne'er-do-well. God only knows what he had on. Often you wouldn't be sure he'd had a shirt under his coat. Everything he could lay his hands upon he would drink away. But he was not one to quarrel. He was a quiet fellow, a soft, good-natured chap. And he'd never ask, he was ashamed. But you could see for yourself the poor fellow wanted a drink. And you would stand at him. And so we got friendly. That's to say, he stuck to me. It was all one to me. And what a man he was, to be sure. Like a little dog, he would follow me. Wherever I went, there he'd be. And all that after our first meeting. And he as thin as a paper thread. At first it was, "Let me stay the night." Well, I let him stay. I looked at his passport, too. The man was all right. Well, the next day it was the same story. And then the third day he came again and sat all day in the window and stayed the night. Well, thinks I, he is sticking to me. Give him food and drink and shelter at night. Too, here I am, a poor man, and a hanger-on to keep as well. And before he came to me, he used to go in the same way to a government's clerk to attach himself to him. They were always drinking together, but he, through trouble of some sort, drank himself into the grave. My man was called Emelian Ilyich. I pondered and pondered what I was to do with him. To drive him away, I was ashamed. I was sorry for him. Such a pitiful, God-forsaken creature I never did set eyes on. And not a word said either. He does not ask, but just sits there and looks into your eyes like a dog. To think what drinking will bring a man down to. How I keep asking myself, how am I to say to him, "You must keep moving, Emelianushka. There's nothing for you here. You've come to the wrong place. I shall soon not have a bite for myself. How am I to keep you, too?" I sat and wondered what he'd do when I said that to him, and I seemed to see how he'd stare at me. If he were to hear me say that, how long he would sit and not understand a word of it. And when it did get home to him at last, how he would get up from the window, would take up his bundle. I can see it now, the red check handkerchief full of holes, with God knows what wrapped in it, which he had always with him. And then how he would set his shabby old coat to rights, so that he would look decent and keep him warm, so that no holes would be seen. He was a man of delicate feelings, and now he'd open the door and go out with tears in his eyes. Well, there's no letting a man go to ruin like that. One's sorry for him. And then again I think, how am I off myself? Wait a bit. Emelianushka, says I am to myself, you've not long to feast with me. I shall soon be going away, and then you will not find me. Well, sir, our family made a move, and Alexander Philomonovich, my master, now deceased, God rest his soul, said, "I am thoroughly satisfied with you, Astafy Ivanovich. When we come back from the country, we will take you on again." I had been butler with them. A nice gentleman he was, but he died the same year. Well, after seeing him off, I took my belongings, what little money I had, and I thought I'd have a rest for a time. So I went to an old woman I knew, and I took a corner in her room. There was only one corner free in it. She had been a nurse, and now she had a pension and a room of her own. Well, now, goodbye, Emelianushka, thinks I. You won't find me now, my boy. And what did you think, sir? I had gone out to see a man I knew, and when I came back in the evening, the first thing I saw was Emelianushka. There he was, sitting in my box, and in his check bundle beside him. He was sitting in his ragged old coat, waiting for me. And to while away the time, he had borrowed a church book from the old lady and was holding it wrong side upwards. He scented me out! My heart sank. Well, thinks I, there's no help for it. Why didn't I turn him out at first? So I asked him straight off. Have you brought your passport, Emelianushka? I sat down on the spot, sir, and began to ponder. Will a vagabond like that be very much trouble to me? And on thinking it over, it seemed he would not be much trouble. He must be fed, I thought. Well, a bit of bread in the morning, and to make it go down better, I'll buy him an onion. And in the evening, onion again with kvass, with some more bread if he wanted it, and if some cabbage soup were to come our way, then he would both have our fill. I am no great eater myself, and a drinking man, as we all know, never eats. All he wants is herb brandy or green vodka. He'll ruin me with this drinking, I thought. And then another idea came into my head, sir, and took great hold on me. So much so, that if Emelianushka had gone away, I should have felt that I had nothing to live for. I do believe I determined on the spot to be a father and a guardian to him. I'll keep him from ruin, I thought. I'll wean him from the glass. You wait a bit, thought I. Very well, Emelianushka, you may stay. Only you must behave yourself. You must obey orders. Well, thinks I to myself, I'll begin by training him to work of some sort. But not all at once. Let him enjoy himself a little first, and look around and find something you are fit for, Emelianushka. For every sort of work a man needs a special ability. You know, sir. And I began to watch him on the quiet. I soon saw Emelianushka was a desperate character. I began, sir, with a word of advice. I think this and that to him. Emelianushka, I said, you ought to take a thought and mend your ways. Have done with drinking. Just look what rags you go about in, that old coat of yours. If I may make bold to say so, is fit for nothing but a sieve. A pretty state of things. It's time to draw the line, sure enough. Emelianushka sat and listened to me with his head hanging down. Would you believe it, sir? It had come to such a pass with him. He'd lost his tongue through drinking and could not speak a word of sense. Talk to him about cucumbers, and he'd answer back about beans. He would listen and listen to me, and then heave such a sigh. What are you sighing for, Emelian Ilyich? I asked him. Oh, nothing. Don't mind me, Astafy Ivanovitch. Do you know there were 2 women fighting in the street today? Astafy Ivanovitch. One upset the other woman's basket of cranberries by accident. Well, what of that? And the second one upset the other's cranberries on purpose and trampled them underfoot too. Well, and what of it, Amelia?
Why, nothing. Astafy Ivanovich, I just mentioned it.
Nothing. I just mentioned it. Emelianushka, my boy, I thought you'd squandered and drunk away your brains.
And do you know, a gentleman dropped a money note on the pavement in Gorohovy Street. No, it was Sadovy Street. And a peasant saw it and said, "That's my luck." And at the same time, another man saw it and said, "No, it's my bit of luck. I saw it before you did."
Well, Emelianovich?
And the fellow had a fight over it, Astafy Ivanovich. But a policeman came, took away the note, give it back to the gentleman, and threatened to take them both.
Well, what of that? What is there edifying about it, Emelianushka?
Well, nothing. To be sure, folks laughed, Astafy Ivanovich.
Ah, Emelianushka! What do the folks matter? You've sold your soul for a brass farthing. But do you know what I have to tell you, Emilia Ilyich?
What, Astafy Ivanovich?
Take a job of some sort. That's what you must do. For the 100th time, I say to you, set to work. Have some mercy on yourself.
What could I set to, Astafy Ivanovich? I don't know what job I could set to. And there is no one who will take me on, Astafy Ivanovich.
That's how you came to be turned off, Emelianushka. You drinking man!
And do you know Vlas, the waiter, was sent for the office today? Astafy Ivanovich?
Why did they send him, Emelianushka?
I asked. Well, I could not say why, Astafy Ivanovich. I suppose they wanted him there. And that's why they sent for him.
Ach, I thought we're in a bad way, poor Emelianushka. The Lord is chastising us for our sins. Well, sir, what is one to do with such a man? But a cunning fellow he was, and no mistake. He'd listen and listen to me, but at last I suppose he got sick of it. As soon as he sees I am beginning to get angry, he'd pick up his old coat, and out he'd slip, and leave no trace. He'd wander about all day and come back at night drunk. Where he got the money from, the Lord only knows. I had no hand in it. No, said I, Emelian Ilyich. You'll come to a bad end. Give over drinking. Mind what I say you now. Give it up. Next time you come home and liquor, you can spend the night on the stairs. I won't let you in. After hearing that threat, Emelianushka sat at home that day and the next, but on the third he slipped off again. I waited and waited. He didn't come back. Well, at least I don't mind owning. I was in fright, and I felt for the man too. What have I done to him? I thought. I've scared him away. Where's the poor fellow gone now? He'll just get lost, maybe. Lord have mercy upon us. Night came on. He did not come. In the morning, I went out into the porch. I looked, and if he hadn't gone to sleep in the porch, there he was with his hand on the step and chilled to the marrow of his bones. What next, Emelianushka? God have mercy on you! Where will you go to next?
Why were you sort of angry with me, Astafy Ivanovich? The other day you were vexed and promised to me to sleep in the porch, so I didn't sort of venture to come in, Astafy Ivanovich, and so I lay down here.
I did feel angry and sorry too.
And with that, I think I'm going to stop there. I'm getting tired. Look, you're more than welcome to join me next week to hear the rest of the story. Thanks for listening. You've been listening to Hearthside Odysseys with Mark Vivas.